So far in Splatoon 3, we've had 3 map reworks. The stages are Mahi-Mahi Resort, Mincemeat Metalworks, and most recently, Undertow Spillway. A rework is when a map's layout gets changed with the intention of improving it. Usually, the original map gets taken out of rotation for a few days, then the reworked version appears with the mid-season update. And in today's video, I want to look at these reworked stages and how they've impacted the game. I'll cover all 3 maps and their major changes, and I'll share how or if they've affected the gameplay. I'll go over these reworks in the order in which we got them. And our first stage is Mahi-Mahi Resort. This map had a lot of issues. It was very cramped and small, it didn't have much cover, and the islands were pretty much useless. This combination of problems made it so that you couldn't flank or approach enemies at an angle, long-ranged weapons were at an unfair advantage because you couldn't counter them at all, and it was really hard to defend once the opposing team gained any advantage. But could a rework fix all these issues? Well, kinda. One massive thing it did was help with how cramped Mahi felt. It added a lot more space both before and after the water drops, which really improves mobility. The islands are also much easier to access now and are actually useful during games. There's also more cover all over the map, and Mahi overall feels less awkward and restrictive. Long-ranged weapons are still quite powerful but aren't as broken as before. However, some issues persist. It's still quite hard to defend, and some modes didn't get the changes they needed. Like tower control, where long range still has that overwhelming advantage. Even if the rework didn't address every issue, these changes are definitely felt in-game. I now find Mahi much more fun, and that extra space to move around had a massive impact on how it plays and feels. My favorite changes have to be in Clamblitz though. Mid has much more cover, and there are now multiple reliable ways to get to the basket. And the water dropping earlier is a pretty cool detail. Overall, I think this is a very successful rework. Mahi-Mahi Resort used to be wasted potential, but now it's a really fun, interesting map even if it isn't perfect. The biggest issues were addressed and we even got a poll, which is always extra points from me. Let's move on to our second rework, Mincemeat Metalworks. In all honesty, I was convinced it would be impossible to fix Mincemeat, that the devs would have an easier time just making another map from scratch. It was a hallway with close to no cover, and long-ranged weapons were so oppressive that it felt like you couldn't do anything if you happened to match against an E-leader. To make it worse, a majority of the walls were uninkable. Almost every mode was a stall fest, and the map felt incredibly restrictive and just not fun. Clamblitz games were especially painful because most of the time, no one would score for over 5 minutes. And then the winner would be whoever managed to score one singular power clam. So clearly, this rework had a lot of things to take care of. One of the things it added was this inkable pillar in mid. It's a small thing, but it gives good enough cover to approach the middle of the map. It also lets you refill your ink and easily get onto or get through the grate. And the pole is nice cover. I also quite like this stack in mid and this ramp thing in Clamblitz and Rainmaker. The map in general has more ramps and is a little bit more spacious and easier to navigate. Another thing I like is the high ground on the left of spawn. It's pretty useless in turf war, splat zones, and Clamblitz, but it's super helpful in Rainmaker and tower control where the objective has to go through that area. But some of Mincemeat's major issues are still present. It's still a hallway with no real routes, most of the walls are still uninkable, and the long-ranged weapons still feel overpowered with not much counterplay. I'm torn about this rework. Some things have been improved, but I can't say it's good because the biggest issues are still there, even if there was an attempt at somewhat fixing them. The changes have still had an impact on games. I feel like it's easier to start pushes and avoid anchors thanks to the added cover, and it generally feels a bit more fair and comfortable to play on. But honestly, I can't help but think about how this is the last version of Mincemeat Metalworks. Like it has been improved, but it's nowhere near where it should be, and now we're just stuck with it. I feel like this is still a successful rework in the sense that it did make the stage better, but I think it needs way more to make it actually good. Finally, we have our most recent rework, Undertow Spillway. This stage didn't have many glaring problems. It was mostly a few small things that added up and made it not very fun for me. One of those flaws is that the map felt a bit awkward. It had a lot of useless things and obstacles in the way. Although walls were also uninkable for some reason, which really did not help with feeling constrained. And its splat zones layout specifically was pretty bad. Two tiny zones separated by this massive wall. It had the issue where the zones would flip constantly, and it was really hard to get a good lead. Rainmaker was much more popular because it's seen as Undertow's best mode, but it had this uninkable path, and in solo queue, it would be rare for the Rainmaker to get past that point. So let's talk about the rework. Some of the changes are good and some are kinda strange. For example, the spawn area. It has multiple small changes, but I feel like they have no impact whatsoever. There's also this ledge thing near the glass that I find pretty cool, but I genuinely cannot tell what issue it was trying to address. For more useful things though, there's also a bit of extra cover in certain areas, which is always nice. But something that really surprised me is that we don't have an Undertow pole. We have an Undertow hole. While this change was quite shocking and even offensive at first, I do think the hole fits well here. It makes certain layouts easier to play on, and it helps with some of the issues I mentioned with splat zones. Another great change is the Rainmaker path. That part that was previously uninkable is now inkable. I think this is a super cool change and it'll help a lot with some of the issues I've encountered in solo. But there's one addition that was really unexpected but ended up being my absolute favorite for this rework, and it's these little caves. At first I didn't really know how to feel about them, but in game they're actually great. They're an interesting feature that other maps don't have, and it makes Undertow feel more unique. They also make that area of the stage feel wider, and it's been fun to play around with them. Also, they added these hilarious ledges. I'm convinced that was specifically to stop dually players from killing themselves. Honestly though, a lot of the changes are in spawn and will not have any meaningful impact on most games. I think that energy should have been put into a flank. But there are enough good additions near mid that the stage still feels better to play on. Overall, I'm happy with this rework. I think all these reworks can be called successful. It's just a matter of how good they needed to be to actually improve their respective map enough. To me, Mahi is the only one that really hits the mark. I was actually shocked when revisiting Old Mahi, because I knew the changes were big, but I needed to see the side-by-side comparison to understand how impactful they were, and I didn't have that same feeling for the other maps. Mincemeat and Undertow still feel better to play on, but I think they could have benefited from a few more changes. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments how you feel about these reworks. Don't forget to like and subscribe on your way out, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye.